Welcome back to Real Shift, where we talk real shit all day, every day, all for the love of movies. I am Joe, and today I'm going to do something a little bit different. I've been doing bucket list reviews on the channel for quite some time now, just kind of going through and covering some classics that I may have missed throughout the course of film history, stuff I always wanted to get to. In this particular case, though, this is something that is very important, I guess you could say, in nerd culture, and something that just kind of escaped me as a young person and just I never had that connection with it like most people did. And I'm talking about Star Trek. This is a full-on confession mode right now. I'm just not all that familiar with Star Trek at all. So I thought this might be a good opportunity to kind of, I guess, get myself familiar with the franchise. I am a Star Wars guy, obviously, as you can see. Not that I think you can only like one or the other, or that they're mutually exclusive or any of that. You can definitely like both, but I was brought up on Star Wars as part of my DNA. My family watched Star Wars, so that was just imprinted on me. Now, I knew people who liked Star Trek, but it was never passed on to me in any way. So just from knowing people, I kind of, I guess, have a passing knowledge of Star Trek, but I don't really know any hardcore details, or I'm not that ingrained in the culture, I guess you could say. I have always been somewhat interested, but at the same time, it felt like such a huge task to try to catch up at this point because there are so many different series and all the movies. And so when I set out to do this series of videos, I kind of asked people like where I should start, I guess. A lot of people said The Next Generation or obviously the original series. And while that would have been cool, it takes a lot of time, obviously, to digest all that, and I need to be able to kind of put out content quicker than that, obviously, and it's going to take me some time to do that whenever I get around to doing it. So I thought it might be a better option to possibly just start with the movies, considering I'm a predominantly movie channel. So this time I'm going to attempt, what my attempt was to possibly go through all the movies first, see how that leaves me feeling, see if I want more, and then possibly go into the different series after that. And if watching the first movie is indication, I will probably end up doing that. I'm not saying I'm going to be a diehard, but I did enjoy now seeing the first two movies in the Star Wars movie franchise. Star Trek. See, I'm already messing up. But I do plan on watching both, at least the original series and the Next Generation at some point. But today, I started with specifically Star Trek: The Motion Picture from 1979, the original movie in the Star Trek movie franchise. So I did research on it leading up to it because I wanted to be as informed as I possibly could without actually watching the TV show, obviously. And I found it kind of interesting that this movie does not have an overwhelmingly positive, I guess, reputation, especially among Star Trek fans, which I found kind of interesting. I think a lot of it has to do with it doesn't have a very deep connection with the series itself. A lot of people felt like it deviated from the tone and the feel of the original series. Now that benefits me because I don't have anything to compare it to anyway, so that's not really going to affect my opinion one way or another. So in a way, I'm kind of glad I watched this first because I can kind of look at it in its own bubble without comparing it to anything. So that works to my benefit for sure. A lot of people criticized it for not having enough action. That's never really been an issue for me, so I didn't take that as anything that might turn me off. Another thing that people were upset about was an over-reliance on special effects. And I find that to be a weird kind of, I guess, problem with a science fiction movie because science fiction is predominantly done with special effects. So, and I do know what they mean, and there's a couple scenes that I'm going to mention in a minute specifically that people, I guess, had an issue with. But I'm going to mention exactly why I think they're fine. So I also found it interesting kind of doing my research because I didn't know this, that this actually came out 10 years after the original series ended, which to me, as someone who doesn't know any better, I would have figured that they kind of at least would have been somewhat running congruently. Like maybe this came out late in the original series run or something like that. But no, they're like 10 years apart. And this was basically Paramount's way of reintroducing, I guess, the franchise to a newer generation, I guess, even though it's only 10 years, but just kind of reintroducing the franchise and trying to capitalize on the success of things like Star Wars and Close Encounters and 2001 A Space Odyssey and stuff like that. So I find that kind of interesting because it's not very often that you have a TV show get revived on the big screen. You know, sometimes we see canceled TV shows come back on different networks or something like that, but it's hardly ever happens where you take a canceled TV show or a finished TV show and then bring it back for the big screen. But I do think that's a testament to Star Trek and the fan base it has and the demand for it and why it actually ended up working. So yeah, kudos on that for sure. So now I'm going to get into the movie itself. I'd like to address first of all the long takes with no dialogue, and that seems to be one thing that people had a lot of issues with. There are these takes in the movie where it's just a spaceship or whatever flying through space, and it's showing a lot of special effects, and there's no dialogue, and it's just the score playing, and there's some reaction shots from the crew, but they seem to go on for a really long time, and I guess you could say they do go on maybe for too long at times. But in the same token, I'm not mad at it, really. The two scenes that are most obvious with it are when Kirk is being transported to the Enterprise early in the movie, and when the Enterprise is entering the cloud and trying to get to the center of it to discover the source or whatever. So those two scenes are probably the ones that people are talking about when they're criticizing, I guess, this cinematic, I guess, decision by the filmmakers. And I think the idea from a filmmaking perspective, like, one, I think it was their way of kind of paying homage to 2001 A Space Odyssey and maybe trying to accomplish the same type of epic feel to it, or at least trying to place a great emphasis on the special effects. Now, the special effects in this movie are really, really well done, in my opinion. They're over 40 years old, but they hold up considerably well, considering how old this movie is. I thought that some of the special effects in this movie, specifically the special effects of the Enterprise inside the cloud, approaching the gate that looks like a big hole and it's pulsating, and it's just really well done, and it looks real. It really does, and it holds up really well. So I think this was just an opportunity, and they might have gotten a little carried away, but in the same token, they were just, I guess, allowing their special effects to carry these moments in the movie, and in my opinion, it works. I didn't have a problem with it. It didn't take me out of the movie or anything like that. And like I said, it's something awesome to look at, and it looks fan. And to be quite honest, it's one of the reasons why I enjoyed this movie so much were the special effects. So I just find it hard to believe that people had an issue with the special overuse of special effects of this movie, because I didn't really get that feeling at all. The story itself also gets a lot of flack, I guess, specifically from Star Trek fans, it seems like. And apparently it deviates quite a bit from the feel, the tone of the original series. Again, I don't have anything to compare it to, so that factor never really entered my mind. But essentially, the plot of the movie is there's this giant, I guess, cloud. It's called the V'ger. It's approaching Earth. It's pretty much destroying everything in its path. Think Galactus from The Rise of the Silver Surfer, only not as shitty. And we have, of course, Admiral James T. Kirk. He's basically reassuming command of the Enterprise after some time away. What's basically happened is the ship has gone through these upgrades. It has had substantial upgrades to the point where it's almost a completely different ship. So Kirk comes in and he's automatically feeling like an outsider on his own ship, essentially on this ship that he is famous to be captain of. So it opens up also these unexpected pitfalls where the crew members start to doubt, some of the crew members start to doubt him, mainly Decker, who was the commanding officer before him, who he took control of the ship from. And I think he has some doubts in himself, because even though he'll never admit it, because Kirk is obviously a very confident, a very gung-ho person, he'll never admit it, but I could see moments in the movie where he actually felt like maybe Decker was better suited to possibly lead the mission at times. It's possible. But he's a proud man and he'd never admit that, of course. But at the same token, like, I thought it was a really good way to introduce Kirk, because you have a guy who's well established to Star Trek fans, So you don't want them to come in and basically know how to do everything. And this is their way around that. This is their way of giving him more adversity, more obstacles to overcome. And I think that's important when you have pre-established characters, because otherwise they just come in and they're able to save the day effortlessly. So this stacks the odds against Kirk a little bit more, with the fact that he has to deal with this cloud in a sense, and he also has to deal with learning the ins and outs of this new ship and all the technology on board and the malfunctions that the ship has, like when they're phasing people up and down from the ship and the phasers have issues and people actually die while phasing. I think that's pretty horrific to think about, but it's just another obstacle for the crew and Kirk to overcome. And it also contributes to Kirk's, I think, hastiness in certain situations in the movie, where like he goes full speed ahead into the cloud without really knowing what it is or what it could possibly do to them. And I think this is him kind of overcompensating and just trying to reestablish his leadership role. Now, it ends up not being too detrimental to the crew, but it could have been. But all of that is just part of Kirk's character, and I really liked how they tried to show you his character while simultaneously building his character at the same time. So that I thought was really well done. I think the other shining character in this movie is definitely Spock. Leonard Nimoy himself probably has the best performance in the movie in one particular scene, and I'm going to kind of set that scene up for a second here. So there's a moment in the movie where he basically takes it upon himself, makes the decision to enter the ship, the alien ship, and try to learn more about it, try to establish contact. And essentially he attempts to mind meld with it because he discovers that it's an actual living thing. Well, it doesn't exactly go well. He gets information, but he obviously has issues. He's knocked unconscious and ejected from the ship. Kirk goes out, grabs him, brings him back into the Enterprise. And there's this moment when he first wakes up and he's trying to explain to them what exactly this thing is. But his performance in it, I thought, was exceptionally good. Like, his performance actually jumped off the screen to me, which I was not expecting, because you're thinking Star Trek, he's coming from you're thinking TV actor, maybe not as polished as like a movie actor would be. But Leonard Nimoy, and he has done theater and stuff like that, so now it makes sense. But he really put on a good performance in this scene, and he really conveys the hopelessness and the sense of not knowing what they're dealing with quite well. And I felt like I had to mention it because I wasn't expecting such a well-acted scene in a movie like this. But he basically explains to them what the V'ger is, explains to them the best route, I guess, to combat it. And he compares it to essentially a child that wants something but doesn't know exactly what they want. So this leads to Kirk and them coming up with a plan, and Kirk eventually has this confrontation with the V'ger, him and a few crew members, and they confront it, and they find out that the V'ger is actually an Earth probe from very long ago that was thought to be lost to a black hole called the Voyager 6. And essentially these living machine aliens, they discovered it on their planet across the galaxy somewhere, and their mission, they take it upon themselves to bring this probe back to find its creator, which is us, of course, on Earth, humans. And they want to combine them, they want to meld them together, which I'm not entirely sure why that is necessary, or why that, maybe I might have missed something in the movie. Again, I've only seen it once, but why it was necessary to meld a human with the V'ger, I guess, or the Voyager. So it's Decker, the initial captain before Kirk took control. Decker is the one who actually takes it upon himself to essentially join with the system or the ship or whatever you want to call it. And essentially he does this because Ilya, who was another crew member who was taken by V'ger and turned into this artificial version of her, I guess. Well, she's already a part of it, so he, I guess for love, essentially, because it does insinuate that he loves her, he joins with it and saves the Earth, saves the Enterprise. So it's really interesting that while Kirk is the main character, he doesn't ultimately he isn't the hero of the story, and that might have actually caused issues with some Star Trek fans too, because it's actually Decker who's the one who sacrifices himself. He gets that big moment. So overall, as far as I can tell, and through research and what a little information I know, Star Trek itself is built on the idea of space exploration, and this idea of a foreign species who's part human, part alive, part machine, and basically they find this probe, human technology, and they misinterpret it or they don't understand it, and they take it upon themselves to bring it back. Like, all that is a very good premise for a movie in itself. Now you add all the Star Trek elements to it on top of that, and the crew and all that, but from a pure science fiction aspect, I think that is just a really cool concept for a film, and it really lends itself to the space exploration aspect of Star Trek, which is predominantly what it's built on. So I didn't find the lack of action, to be a detriment to it. I didn't find the story to be all that confusing or not well done. I felt like everything in this movie seemed to be geared toward making the viewer kind of, I guess, interpret things their own way. Like, a lot of this is left open to the viewer's imagination to try to put things together. And there are deep philosophical meanings in this movie about things like free will and choice and sacrifice. So I think a lot of that maybe was left up to interpretation, and maybe people weren't necessarily ready for those kind of ideas necessarily for a Star Trek movie. They just wanted a more straightforward Star Trek experience. And in my opinion, I really enjoy this movie, and I think it's honestly underrated as a sci-fi movie, just pure sci-fi. Like, even if you take Star Trek aspect out of it, like, I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the visuals. I enjoyed the ideas behind it. I enjoyed the acting, the crew. Like, everything about this movie, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm actually looking forward to watching it again, to be honest. And I'm just a little bit surprised that it doesn't have a better reputation among both Star Trek and sci-fi fans. So overall, obviously, I enjoyed Star Trek the Motion Picture. I don't have a lot of complaints to go along with it. I'm looking forward to watching it again. I'll probably even purchase it, which would be the first Star Trek thing I've ever purchased in my life, to be honest with you. But so I'm on my way. This is me breaking the seal and possibly, making my way to becoming more of a Star Trek fan. And it definitely got me interested to check out more of the films, which I did. I actually saw Wrath of Khan as well, and I'm going to review that as well. So keep an eye out for that review within the next couple of days or so. But yeah, overall, thoroughly enjoyed this. So please let me know in the comments down below if you like this movie, if you hate it, if you're a Star Trek fan, if you're not. If you think me not being a Star Trek fan contributed to me liking the movie better, let me know about all that in the comments down below. As always, please like, comment, share, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, and I'll see you next time right here on Real Shift. Thanks for watching. Peace out.